Hey, I wanted to make a video to talk about Stan Lee. I don't know if this is just gonna be like a reaction to the video Comic Book Girl made, or kind of just my own thoughts on in defense of Stan Lee. I loved Stan Lee when Stan Lee was 95 when he died, and his after his wife died, pretty much everyone knew like he could go any day, and you think you're like prepared. But I remember when I first heard that Stan had died, it hit me a lot harder than I thought it would. And like the first thing that I felt was just that like we're in a world without Stan Lee now, and what does that mean? And it just felt like we've turned such a huge corner, and it's like a new phase of life. I was a huge comic book fan for pretty much my entire life, and Stan was just everywhere. So anyway, what Comic Book Girl said was that like that Stan being surrounded by shady people so late in his life, and like being forced to sign at conventions and everything, like pretty much until he died, was like some kind of karma or bad karma for his own shady dealings with people. And she said something weird about like that Stan Lee being forced to sign his name on all those comics over and over is like him taking ownership of something that he took too much credit for in the first place, and that it was like some kind of weird karmic penance or something. I don't know. And to me, that's just complete nonsense. I mean, yeah, the other guys did a lot, and maybe they weren't around to take as much credit as they deserved, but those early Marvel books, they're just oozing with Stan's personality. So to me, it's just really impossible to say that he wasn't a huge component of their success. And like Spider-Man, if Spider-Man was done just by Steve Ditko without Stan Lee, it would have been very different. Like, example, in that Searching for Steve Ditko documentary that came out, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago, there's a part where I think it's Neil Gaiman talking about how like Ditko would draw like Spider-Man swinging past some protesters in the 60s or whatever, and Ditko's imagining that Spider-Man's gonna shout at them like, "Get a job, you hippies!" And then of course like Stan would actually script it and have Spider-Man saying like, "Hey kids, I'm with you." You know, I mean, obviously Ditko eventually left because they had disagreements in the direction that they wanted it to go. So it's just, I mean, Stan even always said that it was to me, Stan did so much. You can't just say that like it's just nonsense to me. And, I mean, Kirby's best comics were his collaborations with Stan. I mean, his other stuff just didn't connect with them. And even Spider-Man, like when John Romita Sr. took over, the book became more popular. And the other thing to me is like Stan Lee may have been the editor-in-chief of Marvel in the 60s, but he was never the owner of the company. He didn't own any of the characters. Like Stan had a boss too. Martin Goodman was the publisher who told Stan to come up with a superhero team to rival what DC was doing with the Justice League, and that was the catalyst for the Fantastic Four. So, I mean, if you think of like the global profits of all the Marvel characters, or even just Spider-Man alone, and the amount of money that went to Stan, it's a really small piece of all of that. Stan could make the argument that he got fleeced just as much as anyone. I mean, it was work for hire for him too. The other thing that I don't think people take into account a lot is that Stan was the one that like literally for decades went to Hollywood and was out hustling, trying to get the Marvel characters made into movies. Like, there's a famous story that Chris Claremont has told a lot about how him and Stan Lee took a meeting with James Cameron. James Cameron from Terminator, Titanic, and Avatar. And it was about Cameron potentially directing an X-Men movie. But then once Stan Lee mentioned Spider-Man, Cameron lit up. And then James Cameron was going to direct the Spider-Man movie, but the movie rights to Spider-Man were in a dispute for most of the 90s, and it never wound up happening. But Stan did a lot, and he was the face of Marvel, and he was out there. And I mean, it's just my opinion that Stan never intentionally tried to steal from someone or screw someone over. And I mean, he is the co-creator of those characters. It's just factual. And I mean, Steve Ditko, the story behind him, when the first Spider-Man movie came out in 2002 with Tobey Maguire, they supposedly mailed Ditko a check of royalty payments for the movie, and he refused to even cash it. So I mean, he never went around in conventions and was out there. I mean, it's unfortunate that Kirby died so long before Stan or Ditko, but that's not Stan's fault. And then Comic Book Girl played the clip of Alan Moore. I don't know what Alan Moore was talking about. Something about it was just nonsense. Alan Moore's a kook who like believes in magic and all kinds of silly stuff and whatever. So if you want my opinion, Stan deserves all the credit that he deserves more credit. So that's it from me.